Do you believe your existence has a purpose, or could that purpose be just an illusion created to comfort you? Have you ever stopped to think about what truly motivates your daily actions? Albert Camus would say that all these questions are useless. He challenged the world by claiming that we live in an indifferent universe, devoid of any predetermined meaning. Yet, at the same time, he invited us to embrace this paradox. Why? Because he believed that only by confronting this reality can we find true freedom and create our own meaning. What does this mean for you? Are you ready to question everything you believe about life? This video will take you on a journey where certainties crumble, but something even greater may emerge. Life sometimes presents us with such bewildering scenarios that we feel like characters in a plot with no defined script. Albert Camus, one of the great thinkers of the 20th century, dedicated much of his philosophical reflection to this feeling of disorientation, what he called the absurd. For Camus, the absurd arises from the conflict between our innate desire to find meaning in life and the indifferent silence of the universe, a relentless search for answers that seemingly do not exist. Camus brilliantly illustrates this idea with the story of Sisyphus, a figure from Greek mythology condemned to a cruel fate, pushing a boulder to the top of a hill, only to see it roll back down to the starting point, repeating this cycle for all eternity. This powerful image symbolizes human routine, our daily struggles, and the apparent lack of purpose that often accompanies our efforts. Who hasn't felt like Sisyphus, trapped in a cycle that seems to lead nowhere? However, Camus does not leave us in the darkness. He does not suggest that this perception of the absurd should lead us to despair or surrender. Quite the opposite. From this awareness, he proposes a creative and liberating rebellion. If life has no given meaning, then we are free to create our own. It is in this act of creation, even in the face of indifference, that our true strength lies. By accepting the absurd, according to Camus, we find a unique form of freedom. Free from the burden of searching for a universal meaning, we can value each experience, each moment, as an end in itself. As he himself wrote, life itself has no meaning, but each of us can give it our own. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson. It is not about eliminating the absurd, but learning to live with it, accepting the boulder, recognizing the cycle, and still finding reasons to keep pushing it. Perhaps, in the act of climbing the hill, we discover that the value of the journey lies in the path itself, not in the destination. That is the essence of Sisyphus, and perhaps the greatest gift that the absurd offers us, the freedom to give meaning to what no one else can. In his profound reflection on the absurdity of life, Albert Camus presents three possible responses to face this existential paradox: suicide, faith, and acceptance. He categorically rejects suicide, arguing that just like life, death also lacks meaning. It is not a solution, but an abrupt interruption that does not resolve the dilemma of the absurd. He also dismisses blind faith, considering it a way to abandon critical thinking. For Camus, submitting to religious dogmas or absolute truths is to renounce the freedom to reason and to confront reality as it is. In this sense, faith would be merely an escape, a way of disguising the absurdity of existence. The path Camus proposes is acceptance. Acknowledging the lack of inherent meaning is, paradoxically, the first step toward finding an authentic one. By facing the absurd with courage and clarity, we are challenged to create our own purpose. In that confrontation, we find the freedom to live genuinely, without illusions and without crutches. The act of embracing the absurd thus becomes an act of rebellion, a powerful affirmation of our ability to choose and to be. This philosophy is even more relevant in the modern world, where we are constantly bombarded with choices, distractions, and information. Camus's message serves as a compass, guiding us through the chaos. By accepting life as it is, with all its uncertainty, we free ourselves from the anguish of trying to find a definitive meaning. As Camus wrote, "In the midst of winter, I found within me an invincible summer." That image of the invincible summer represents the human desire for meaning, a flame that persists even in the biting cold of a seemingly meaningless world. On the other hand, winter symbolizes the harsh reality of an indifferent universe, where meaning is not given to us, but must be constructed by us. It is in this contrast that the beauty of Camus' thought lies, the human capacity to resist despair, and in the midst of emptiness, to find reasons to continue. By acknowledging the absurd, we do not become its victims, but creators of our own narrative. And it is in that act of creation, in that brave confrontation, that life truly becomes ours, authentic, free, and full of the meanings we choose for ourselves. There are moments in life when two powerful forces collide within us, that almost insatiable desire to find meaning in things, like the heat of summer that refuses to fade, and the cold reality of a world that often seems indifferent, almost empty of significance. It is precisely in this clash that the absurd takes shape. In this state, each of us becomes a universe unto ourselves, waging a silent battle between what we want life to be and what it actually is. Albert Camus captured this tension masterfully. He reminds us that the absurd is an essential part of the human experience, a reflection of the duality between our deep longing for meaning and the apparent lack of it in the world. This is an invitation to reflection, to the courage to face the human condition without illusions, but also without surrendering. The question is not to eliminate the absurd, but to recognize it as part of our path. Camus challenges us to abandon the desperate search for meaning in external structures, in society, relationships, or everyday events, and to look inward. He suggests that the path to authenticity does not lie in finding definitive answers in the external world, but in exploring our own being. Within each of us exists a core of truth, a place of freedom that is indivisible and profoundly ours. By immersing ourselves in this internal search, we begin to discover who we truly are. We uncover our most genuine passions, identify the desires that move our souls, and little by little, free ourselves from external illusions that once trapped us. This process is transformative. It not only makes us more aware of our own existence, but also strengthens us to face adversity with greater courage. And it is precisely in the most difficult moments, those when life knocks us down, as in our most traumatic experiences, that this inner strength becomes crucial. By connecting with our inner core, we find the resilience needed to move forward. In this process, we understand that it is not about eliminating pain or the absurd, but about learning to coexist with them, transforming them into part of our story, a source of meaning and growth. As Camus wisely said, true generosity toward the future consists in giving everything to the present. For him, true freedom does not lie in escaping difficulties or pretending that suffering does not exist, but in the conscious and deliberate act of standing firm in the face of the absurd. To Camus, the absurd is not something to be solved or escaped. It is the fundamental condition of human existence. We live in a world that does not provide inherent meaning, and yet we constantly seek it. The contradiction between our deep desire for purpose and the silence of the universe is what creates the absurd. And yet, rather than succumbing to despair or clinging to illusions, Camus proposes a third way: rebellion. But what does it mean to rebel? It is not a rejection of life, nor a nihilistic refusal to engage with the world. On the contrary, rebellion is an act of affirmation, a declaration that life, even in its absurdity, is worth living. To rebel is to recognize the lack of meaning and still choose to act, to create, to love, and to engage with the world wholeheartedly. It is an embrace of life in all its contradictions, an insistence on living fully despite knowing that no ultimate answers will be provided. This rebellion is not loud, destructive, or rooted in anger. It is quiet, persistent, and deeply personal. It is the refusal to be crushed by the weight of existential uncertainty. It is the decision to get up every morning and continue, not because there is a grand purpose waiting for us, but precisely because there isn't. Because in the face of nothingness, we have the power to create our own meaning. It is in our daily acts, our passions, our art, and our love that we shape our existence. Camus compares this defiant stance to the myth of Sisyphus, the man condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to roll back down each time. At first glance, Sisyphus' fate seems tragic. Yet, Camus invites us to imagine Sisyphus as happy, not because he has been freed from his task, but because he has accepted it. In that acceptance, in that conscious rebellion against despair, he finds a strange and paradoxical freedom. His life is not dictated by gods or external forces. It belongs entirely to him, and so it is with us. We may not be pushing literal boulders up hills, but we face our own struggles, our own repetitive cycles, our own questions that seem to have no answer. The world may not provide us with meaning, but that does not mean we are powerless. On the contrary, it means that we are the ones who must create meaning. And in that act of creation, whether through relationships, art, work, or simply the choice to continue, we assert our freedom. To live absurdly is not to live without joy. It is to recognize the fleeting nature of everything and still choose to love, to laugh, to build, and to connect. It is to understand that while we may never find ultimate answers, the search itself is what gives life its depth. It is to accept that there will always be struggle, yet within that struggle, there is beauty. So when life seems meaningless, when you find yourself questioning everything, when you feel lost in the vastness of existence, remember, the meaning you seek is not something to be found, but something to be created. It is not given by the universe, but forged in your own hands. The absurd is not a prison. It is an invitation to live freely, to love deeply, and to carve your own path, knowing that in the end, the journey itself is all that matters. Because in the end, the greatest act of rebellion is not in seeking answers, but in embracing life itself.